Today, we're looking at Private Reserve's Purple Haze. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Private Reserve's Purple Haze is a purple ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a cross Bailey with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this very light purple that's pushing its way up, and then it becomes this very, very light pale green across the top. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the line of ink across the bottom looks a little more there, not as much purple pushes up. We do see some water separation from the purple to that very light green that occurs. The water stopped moving exactly with the ink in both of these chromatographies, which was kind of interesting. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it does not fare very well. It blows out all over and becomes blurry in quite a few different spots. It makes me feel unsure, like I would not use it in a note-taking situation. Based on that performance, I'm surprised with what happened with water. Water only lifted away the darkest part of the inks, but left enough of this purple behind that it looks purple still. It's still there. Now, Pen Flush did everything water did and a bit more. You see the beginnings of the hope of some white of the paper at the top, and I see the beginnings of some hope because it was only 30 seconds that Pen Flush was down. But we are lifting a lot of the ink. I really do think that given a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, that Pen Flush would do it. But if it didn't, the 1/3 bleach solution absolutely removes it from the paper, leaving nothing behind. I really don't think it's going to take the 1/3 bleach solution. I didn't have any trouble getting this out of my pen using Pen Flush. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5. with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Private Reserve's Purple Haze has a viscosity of 2.6, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Private Reserve's Purple Haze has an average dry time of 7 seconds, making this a very fast drying ink. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. I am fighting consistently with where I'm supposed to put this mic lately. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. It is a lovely blue. No shade, I'm sorry, it has shade. It's a lovely blue. It's got some really nice light and dark areas within it. Like A is much lighter. A is much lighter than the TE in Private. The E in Haze is much darker than the Z. The H starts dark, it gets lighter at the A, and so it does have some very nice shading in its writing. It's just blue shading. In the world? I don't know. I am stuck dealing with this microphone. I need to replace it. The extra fine has the same tones as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. Nice shading in here. Like the T in the is darker than the rest of the. The K in quick is much darker than the rest of quick. Brown starts dark and works its way light. Fox is a very dark word all the way through. It's a little lighter a tone than I would have expected, and especially as blue, which was completely unexpected. 3 seconds to dry. Now the medium is the same tones that we got with the extra fine and the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has some very nice shading that's going on. Like we see a very dark top of the H in the. Quick starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Brown starts dark and gets lighter as it goes. Dog is a very dark word, especially underneath brown, which is much lighter. Only 8 seconds to dry. It's like I'm getting feedback, but it doesn't make sense. Only 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows a lot of color variation, and we got a lot of color variation. And the smear test you could likely recover if you smeared while you were writing. What in the world? This is very distressing. Let's try this. See, well, I don't know. Try again. I'm hoping I remember to edit this out, but we shall see, won't we? The Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting, not really. It's a very light ink. Yes, it's going to ghost a little bit, but it's really not bad, especially for Tomoe River. We have on the 1.1 no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading. This paper tends to kill the shade that ink has. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. There are a couple spots of some shading, like the K does look a little bit darker. The PS in jumps looks a little bit darker. The D in dry is definitely a bit darker. So we do get some shading throughout this writing. It only took 7 seconds to dry. The medium is a darker tone than we see with the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has spots of shading. So like the K in quick is much darker. The word dog is much darker than the word brown. Seconds is a very dark word. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation, and we do see plenty of color variation. And a smear test, you could probably recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Rhodia. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has spots of shading, like the E in haze is definitely darker. The P in purple is definitely darker. The word reserve is darker than most of the word private, so we see some nice shading up here. The extra fine is slightly lighter tone, slightly lighter. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has some very nice shading that's going on. Again, it's letters like the H in the K in quick, the Q in quick, B in brown, the F in fox, P in jumps, very nice throughout. Spots, letters of darker writing, which is nice to see. 4 seconds to dry. Now medium is a slightly darker tone than what we see with the extra fine, about the same tone that I'm seeing with the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and lovely shading throughout. Like the K in quick is much darker. The word lazy is quite light compared to the line written above, like at the end of quick or the beginning of brown. Brown goes from dark to light. Super nice. The X in fox is very dark. 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation, and we saw plenty of color variation. And a smear test, you could likely recover this if you smeared while you were writing. So what happens when we put this onto a different tone paper, like the yellow Rhodia? Well, we didn't get any bleeding or ghosting, and we didn't expect any bleeding or ghosting. But look at the tone. Now this is where I'm seeing purple with the yellow background. I see blue on white. I see purple on yellow. So we get purple out of Purple Haze with yellow background. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading whatsoever. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone than we got with the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does have some spots of shading, like the word the is darker than the words around it. Brown starts dark and works its way light. Quick starts light and works its way dark. The Z in lazy is certainly darker than the rest of the word. 4 seconds to dry. Now the medium becomes darker, and about the the darker tone of the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading. Quick, it starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Brown starts dark and works its way light. Over starts light and works its way dark. 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we got plenty of color variation. And a smear test you could likely recover if you smeared while you were writing. So, North Books. No bleeding, no ghosting. Back to blue. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It has spots of shading throughout, like the A is very dark in the Private, and the E's, both of the E's, all three of the E's are very dark in the word Reserve. The P in purple, the second P, gets darker than the rest of the word, so it's very nice. The extra fine is the same tone as we see in the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and amazingly, we do see shading here, like the word quick is much darker than the word brown. But then fox becomes a much darker word again. Now the shading I'm seeing is a difference in word. You're not seeing it as much on camera, but I'm definitely seeing it in person. It only took 1 second to dry. And with 1 second to dry to actually see some shading come through is an amazing thing. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading, like the H in the is much darker than the rest of the word. The K in quick is much darker than the rest of the word. The word the is much darker than the word over. And again, it only took 1 second to dry. The scrubby for both show plenty of color variation, and we actually get color variation at only a second to dry. And look at that smear test. It almost doesn't smear. Very nice stuff. Field notes paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. Now this field notes paper, this is when, I had to call them to find out or email them, and it's a 60-pound paper. Just a nice thick paper, so I don't get the same thing from their pocket-sized notebooks, but this stuff does pretty good. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and I see no shading at all. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading, like the word quick is much darker than the word over. The is much darker than the word lazy. Fox starts lighter and works its way darker. It only took 1 second to dry. The medium is the same tone that we get with the extra fine. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and fewer spots of shading. Like in here, I only see the dot of the quick is a bit darker. The is darker than the word quick. Brown starts a little bit darker and then works its way lighter. Fox starts lighter, works its way a little bit darker. So we see some shading going on. I don't know how long it took to dry. I forgot to write it down. I have to assume it was not very long looking at the smear test. Looking at the scrubby, I see plenty of color variation, and we see plenty of color variation in the writing sample. The smear test, you can barely smear this if you're lucky. So this is very good ink for this paper. And that is all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Private Reserve's Purple Haze, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I really wanted a bright orange to go with it, and I chose Elixir's Tangerine because it did just that. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Private Reserve's Purple Haze? It's such a light purple that leans blue. It looks more like a blue ink. From the sample I was testing, I would much rather see it marketed as a blue than a purple. As a blue, it shades very well. As a purple, it looks blue. I don't know. Tell me if you had the same trouble looking at this sample. It left me disappointed, especially given its name. It made me want a very vivid and screaming purple by its name. Thanks for watching.